From the author of Spinsterella, A Strange and Unusual Romance comes Spellbound, a darker shade of black. Get Spellbound this Halloween in paperback and ebook at online booksellers everywhere. There's a whole lot of controversy swirling around the Nate Parker film Birth of a Nation. And when you look at that controversy from a panoramic perspective, you clearly see the insanity of the Afro-American Negro community on display. Now, many of these Afro-American Negroes will sit there and tell you that Birth of a Nation will eventually be a profitable film. I'm sorry, but as a man who has studied the entertainment business for over 30 years and has studied numbers for the American box office for over 25 years, I can tell you honestly, Birth of a Nation is a flop. When you look at the numbers, and if you understand the numbers, it is clear to me that Birth of a Nation is a flop. Now, this Birth of a Nation film may have cost Nate Parker $6 million, and he may have sold it for $17 million, but this film was not profitable to the distributors, the movie studios, and the movie theaters, which paid Nate Parker $17 million. You see, in order for a film to be considered profitable by a movie studio, that film needs to pretty much make 3 times its production costs in about 2 weeks or so. That's what they would consider on the road to profitability. Now, Birth of a Nation opened at number 6 at the box office at about $6 or $7 million. So the film studio, the distributor, and the movie owners aren't making any money when you break the numbers apart on that number 6 opening. They haven't even begun to scratch the surface of all the costs that they would have to recoup. In order for a film that they spent $17 million to be considered profitable, that film has to make $50 million. And with a number 6 opening, chances of Birth of a Nation making back any sort of break-even point at that $50 million are slim to none, especially when you consider that the film was released on October 7th in one of the deadest periods in film. When it comes down to the movie schedule, this film was released in what they call the dead zone. And that dead zone is from September to early October. So we're looking at films like Sully, which pretty much opened at $33 million at number 1. And then we look at this film, which opened at number 6 at $6 million. And that film is not going to do well because we look at this film and where it's placed. It's right before the holiday movie season. The holiday movie season starts in November. So we're looking at that, and then plus we have the Halloween season, Halloween weekend coming up before that. So this film is pretty much DOA in terms of box office. But we have many of these Negroes out here who are sitting up here believing that this film is eventually going to reach profitability. I'm sorry, but that's just not going to happen. The studios can't make any money on this film, the distributors can't make any money on this film, and the theaters can't make any money on this film. This film was released on over 1,700 screens, and for it to come back with a $6 million opening on 1,700 screens was basically an embarrassment. No theater owner is going to want to deal with this again because they look at this and go, we opened on 1,700 screens and we had a $6 million opening. Many of those theaters within the first week were starting to pull this film because, again, we have the Halloween weekend coming up. And during that Halloween weekend, they're wanting to get all those kids coming in. They want to get those families that are getting ready to come in. And we have bigger movies coming up on the holiday schedule, like Doctor Strange coming up. So, again, this movie was nothing more than a certified flop. Now, when you look at this Nate Parker, you cannot see him as some sort of hero who is out to create a positive image of African Americans and the African American experience. And the reason why you can't see him as someone who's out to create a positive image of the African American experience is because the film that he has created is diametrically opposed to the positions he takes in his personal life. In order for someone to create a book or a film or any sort of media and go out here and sell it to an audience, they actually have to believe in what they're doing, and they have to, in order to believe the positions that they're taking. And he was trying to sell you something, and he didn't believe it at all. Here you have your Nate Parker, a Harvard-educated black man, sitting here saying that he's going to create a film about Nat Turner. a man who led a slave rebellion. However, when we look at Nate Parker's personal life, he's out here sleeping with the enemy, and he's been doing so since college. Now, I'm not going to get into that whole trial because, again, that had been adjudicated by the courts. He was acquitted in the court system, but I'm looking at his position and relationships with white women ever since college and his marriage to a white woman. And again, that position that he's taking in his personal life is a complete and utter contradiction to the message he presents in his film. In his film, he is talking about black empowerment and fighting white supremacy. However, we see that this man who was making this film about this black man who hates black white men is just like the pro-blacks in real life who go out and say they hate the white man. However, the white woman is fine. And the white woman is fine for Nate Parker, but we look at his film and he's promoting ideas that, again, contradict his own personal opinions and views. And that's not really being objective, and it's not really a good, strong selling point for the film, because we see that this was one of the positions that pretty much undid Birth of a Nation, was Nate Parker not being able to stand behind his own material and show everyone that he had some sort of integrity regarding his film. Because in order for him to sell this story of a slave rebellion to people, you would think he would be standing up on the platform and supporting the positions he presents in his own film. He didn't do that. And that was one of the reasons why a lot of people pretty much looked at this film and said to themselves, I'm not going to see this, because this man sits here and says he's about this Nat Turner who led the slave rebellion, but here he is again sleeping with the enemy. Now, when it comes down to this Birth of a Nation movie, the other big problem with it is that it's historically inaccurate. Now, in Nate Parker's Birth of a Nation, Nat Turner is presented like some sort of Superman. And that whole concept of Nat Turner is ridiculous, and it's exaggerated and even caricaturized. It's just not who Nat Turner was. Now, historically, everyone who has read historical compositions on this Nat Turner will tell you that this Nat Turner was pretty much mentally ill. He was severely mentally ill, and he had this extreme hatred of the white man, similar to the pro-black. And he was leading this insurrection during a time when many whites were considering doing something about helping the Negro and the slave situation. And with his insurrection, he pretty much set back all the work of abolitionists and many others who were trying to help the Negro. Because what he was doing was going out here and he led this insurrection, and this insurrection wasn't even successful when you compare it to other insurrections such as the Stonewall Rebellion, which came a couple of years before, because in the Stonewall Rebellion you had blacks and whites rebelling against the system of slavery. But this rebellion, pretty much, only 50 white people were killed and 200 blacks were killed. And in the aftermath, what happened was, because of this rebellion, you had policies put in place such as the fugitive slave law, which pretty much created policies that told people they could not teach slaves how to read and write. Slaves had to have their manumission papers, and slaves were more watched than before, thanks to Nat Turner's slave rebellion. However, the way it's told in Birth of a Nation, Nat Turner is some sort of Superman who pretty much leads his people and sends them to go out and fight. However, when you look at the gains that were in the real world, they weren't depicted in this film, and this film is horribly historically inaccurate. Now, there's other parts of the film that are historically inaccurate as well. Some parts they're saying that Nat Turner had a family, and that wasn't accurate as well. This is what makes this film, pretty much phony baloney, because this guy, he's making this film about this Nat Turner, but he's not going to the lengths to do the research the way Spike Lee did on your Malcolm X. Now, if you look at Malcolm X, Spike Lee meticulously looked at this man's biography, this man's history, and he made in his adaptation, he made every effort to stay true to the story of Malcolm X. He did not fudge anything. He did not exaggerate anything. He gave us a balanced picture of who Malcolm X was, from the Detroit Red days to the prison days to the Nation of Islam days to the days when he found out the truth about Elijah Muhammad, a very, very balanced depiction. However, Your Birth of a Nation gives us a grossly inaccurate picture of this Nat Turner, an exaggerated picture, and that's not what we need right now. We needed, if you want to make a biographical film, you need to present your material from an objective perspective. And this is one of the things that I believe makes Nate Parker grossly unqualified to have made this film. Yes, he had the money to make this film, but he was grossly unqualified to make this film because, again, one, he has that conflict of interest in having pursued these relationships with white women, and then was married to a white woman while he made this film. And then on top of it, he's going to take this Nat Turner character, and he's not going to do the research to make the character appear as accurate as possible. So when I look at his film, yes, it's well shot and probably well acted, but he misses out on the foundations of what make a quality film. And I look at this, Birth of a Nation, and the controversy swirling around it, and these are the reasons why I pretty much take a look at this film and look at this filmmaker and say that he's dysfunctional. Now, the other part of this whole controversy that is mind-boggling to me is the response from these groups, such as your pro-blacks, your black feminists, and your hoteps. Now, Nate Parker probably thought he was going to be able to target these Negroes with this film, and what he was surprised to see was there was going to be a backlash. Now, that backlash does not surprise me because I understand this Afro-American Negro, and I understand the cognitive distortion they have regarding their own image. They only get upset about an image of themselves when it's presented by another black person. And they were upset that Nate Parker, a black man, was going out here to try to present an image of themselves to them. This is why they rejected the image. In order for them to accept the image, you have to understand that the Afro-American Negro only accepts images only if they fit the narrative of the white liberal. And the Nat Turner concept does not fit the narrative of the white liberal. Why? The Nat Turner story pretty much does not promote the idea of victimization to the Afro-American Negro. And you have to present the narrative of victimization if you hope to have any sort of success with any sort of project or any sort of concept you present to the Afro-American Negro. And here you had Nate Parker, who again was being disingenuous when he produced this Nat Turner film, trying to sell them a image of rebellion to the Negro. And you have these pro-blacks, these hoteps, and these black feminists who came out against the film. And when they did this, they were actually telling on themselves. And what they were telling the world was this: they love white folks. Because here's a film that these pro-blacks, these hoteps, and these black feminists primarily have been calling for years. These were the groups that pretty much screamed the loudest. These were the groups that pretty much demanded these types of material for most. And here were these Negroes going out here to protest and threaten to boycott Nate Parker's film because, one, they did not like the idea of Nate Parker being involved with this white female, and two, because he was presenting content featuring material that pretty much told the world that their idea about their ideas. And they're the ones who said the most that we need these more balanced images, more humanized images. We need different stories about the black experience. However, when given the opportunity to go out and see those types of films, these are the three groups that went to social media protesting and telling everyone not to go see Your Birth of a Nation. Pretty much leading to these studio executives, film distributors, and theater owners scratching their heads because they're sitting there listening to this Negro tell them that this is the type of material they want. However, when they got the opportunity to go see it, they put it at sixth place. Now, as a guy who goes out here and creates positive stories about the African American experience and has tried to sell books to the Afro-American Negro, I could have told them that this was going to be the outcome because I understand this Negro's cognitive distortion. I understand that oftentimes this Negro will say one thing and then do another. And then he'll sit there and then tell you it's your fault for not producing what he wanted, when you actually went out and produced what he wanted, what he said he wanted, but in actuality, what he really wants is more of the same. Because this Negro is really, he's a codependent person. And like the alcoholic or the drug addict you deal with, they'll say they want change, they'll say they want solutions, but in reality, you have to look at their actions more so than their words, because their actions speak louder than their words. Because by their actions, Nate Parker, Mr. Disingenuous, by making this film, was making a statement, and these Afro American Negroes were making a statement. And none of them were really serious about change. None of them were passionate about change. They all were trying to hustle each other in this covert contract. And at the end of the day, the only people who wound up getting hustled, sadly, were the theater owners, the distributors, and the movie studio that went out to buy this film. Because these Negroes, again, they do not want solutions. They do not want change. They'll sit there and complain about these things, but when you look at their actions, they speak 10 times louder than the words presented in the dialogue of Nate Parker's farcical Birth of a Nation movie on that screen. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.